On today's show, episode number 30 of the Real Recovery podcast, we feature Mike Marshall, the executive director of Oregon Recovers. Mike shares his personal recovery journey and discusses the vital work being done to address Oregon's addiction crisis. From organizing the recovery community to advocating for policy change, Mike brings a unique perspective on the importance of collective action and the need for better access to treatment and support. Tune in for a powerful and inspiring conversation.
Hello, and welcome to the Real Recovery Podcast. I'm Julie, your co-host. On this journey of healing and transformation, together with my co-host Peter, we dive into the heart of recovery, sharing stories that resonate with courage and inspiration.
That's right, Julie. Each episode is a new chapter in this vast narrative of recovery, and we're honored to bring them to you. But keep in mind the perspectives you'll hear are for informational purposes only and may not reflect the views of the podcast or our partners.
Indeed, while these conversations can be a powerful part of your recovery toolkit, they are not substitute for professional medical advice. We encourage you to seek guidance from your healthcare provider for any treatment-related decisions.
And if you're facing an immediate crisis, or if you just need to talk to someone who understands, don't hesitate to call the Recovery Crisis Line at 503-223-8569. That number is also on our website. Help is available 24/7.
Now let's begin our episode
of Recovery, Real Recovery.
Have one pair of clothing when he got sober, so yeah.
So welcome to the Real Recovery Podcast.
Terrific.
I'm here with my co-host Julie. I'm Peter.
Hi.
And we're here with
Hi.
Mike Marshall. And
So glad to be here with you guys.
yeah, glad to have you. Really glad to have you here in my humble studio. It's like, yeah, you're coming to my house. I wish I had a fancy studio and
Oh, this
all
is
the
great.
bells and whistles. This gets the job done, and that's
Yeah.
all that matters, right?
Actually comfortable here now. I don't know if I want a fancy
Right,
studio.
right.
And it's close to my house. We were talking to Mike before we started the podcast. Part of the reason, and it's Mike Marshall, that we wanted Mike on the podcast, many reasons. But in a lot of stories that we've done, your name comes up that you helped them start their
inspired,
foundation, encouraged them, taught them. And you're quite big in recovery in Oregon. And that's what we're trying to share the message for. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. That makes me a little verklempt to hear that other people are giving me that credit. So
I actually
thanks
think
for sharing
it's
it.
really honorable.
Yeah.
I really do. I don't know. I've known Izzy for a long time and he loves you. So there you go.
And who doesn't love Izzy?
Right?
I was a
It's a
sponsor.
love-hate relationship. No.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I sponsored him first and got him through
Wow.
the steps. And I actually bought him his very first GTD shirt.
I think I was at the meeting, the lunch bunch meeting, which I don't go to very often, where Izzy showed up after his last relapse, because I remember him, or
I
it was like the
see.
second meeting or something like that. I remember him telling his story, and that he was in a shelter, I think, and he talked about how running had been such an important part for him. And then I didn't meet him then for 2 years, 3 years after that. But
I met him before relapse and after
Yeah.
relapse. And then one day we were at a meeting and him and the host, Misty, and Misty said, "You're on your 4-step. You better do it now, else you go out." And she was like, "Julie," and I was like, "I'll do your 4-step with you." And I took him to the grotto with some pizza and we did the 4th and 5th step. And then the following week we're at the meeting and he's like, "Julie's agreed to be my sponsor." And I was like,
that's so Izzy.
yeah. And I was like, really? And you know how you don't want to say no because there's
Yeah.
a whole room of people?
Yeah.
And at that time, I was a senior operations manager for Sprint, and I didn't know if I had enough time for Izzy, but it actually has worked out well. And then, like I said, we were at my sponsor's house, who was 90-something at the time, taking him a meeting because he couldn't get out when
Sweet.
Izzy started the running thing.
Oh,
And so he gave me his logo, and I bought him his first GTD shirt.
nice.
So I've been there before it blew up.
Yep.
And there when he was working hard at the Portland City Grill, and just doing it out of his heart, and then
Yeah.
asking Lunch Bunch for shoes. And really from the that's why I was at the Freedom Awards last year and I cried the entire ceremony, because watching the progress
Yeah.
and seeing it come truly from a voluntary perspective to what it is now.
He's part of my inspiration to move forward with what we're doing today. His story and meeting him and getting to know him has been a big inspiration.
Yeah. His aspirations are infectious, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no obstacle that he won't go over or around or blow over or whatever the case may be. He's such a gift to the recovery community.
Yeah, I claim him. He's my husband.
There you go.
My aunt.
So welcome to
Loves
the
it.
Izzy Show.
Yeah.
No, I'm
Yeah.
just-
Yeah, stop talking about this bitch. No, just kidding. So tell us
yeah, let's hear about
your
you
story,
and
how you got into all this. And
Yeah.
your journey, your recovery journey.
My recovery journey. I won't go too far into it other than I'm 62 years old and
you look amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And born into your basic middle-class family, Irish Catholic family back in the early 60s, and moving up the food chain. And my grandparents were immigrants from Canada. And then my mom died when I was 10, of colon cancer, and it was a really sad, long death. And I now know that adverse childhood experiences are a big contributor to ultimately someone having addiction. And obviously, when you lose your mom at the age of 10, and it was 1972, so you don't talk about it. Instead, your Irish Catholic family members keep giving you alcohol to make you feel better or to forget about it. And fast forward, I'm also gay, so 2 years after that, my dad moved us overseas. So we went to a foreign country, for Switzerland and then Germany. And then I started puberty and started to realize that I was gay, which back in the mid 70s was nothing you wanted to be.
No.
And there was no imagination for it either, right? But I could drink. My dad bought me my first legal beer at the Oktoberfest in Munich in 1972.
Wow.
Wow.
Now that's a very privileged thing to say. I got to go to the Oktoberfest in Munich in 1972, and I was allowed to drink in high school because we couldn't drive. And my parents were like, just drink responsibly. But in my Irish Catholic family, that just meant you didn't throw up. But not terrible consequences as a result of that. Moved back to the States when I was a senior in high school, went off to college, was a binge drinker, not at the level of today, but was by no means a daily thing. Didn't start smoking pot till I was 19 or 20 years old, but that was never a big thing for me. Alcohol was, and I was in the closet. And so then I started my professional career in politics and went to Washington, D.C. and worked on Capitol Hill, and we would drink every night but we'd be dressed up and we'd go to these receptions and oysters on the half shell and champagne, and that would be dinner because we were only making 16, 17 grand a year. And then I've had a pretty extraordinary life. I was in politics out in California, and then when the Berlin Wall came down, I went to Eastern Europe and started doing organizing work there, helped people put together an election monitoring and a voter education effort. And from there, I went to Cambodia, where the UN was sponsoring elections, and we trained the political parties first on how to compete in an election that was increasingly violent because the former Khmer Rouge were competing as the people in power. And that was just crazy. I was 30 years old and I was doing this. I met my first prime minister when I was 29 years old in Romania, and then the crown prince of Cambodia when I moved there. And it was really heady stuff, and it was extraordinary. And I was part of something really amazing, but I was also starting to decide I needed to come out of the closet. And I was just drinking a lot because it's just what I did. And it's what I was taught to do. Came back to the States and to California and decided I was going to be out, and started going to the gym and living in San Francisco and started going to the dance clubs when I was in my mid 30s, and ecstasy was what everybody was doing. And that was the funnest damn thing in the world. And it was actually very helpful to coming out. They're treating it now for trauma. They use it to treat people with trauma. And I totally get it. It allowed me to all the internalized homophobia to just move beyond it pretty quickly. But
That's funny because we're close in age. I just turned 59.
okay.
And ecstasy was my thing at the City nightclub here in Portland. And I would dance my ass off all night.
Right.
And I was with gay men too, so it's perfect.
The challenge was everyone else would take one hit of ecstasy, and by the end of the evening, I'd be on my third hit of ecstasy, right?
Oh,
One
yeah.
was never enough.
Yeah.
One was plenty for me.
But then ecstasy led to crystal meth because that's very much a party drug and it's a big sex drug. And that started a 10-year meth addiction that I would go a couple months without it because I'd swore I never want to do it again. But I would use alcohol as the replacement. And then one night I'd just have too many cocktails and I'd end up someplace I shouldn't be doing meth with a couple guys. And anyway, by 2008, I'd lost my family. I'd seroconverted to HIV and Hep C, and I'd lost my savings and I couldn't get a job anymore. And I just woke up one morning and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And as we like to say, and reached out to a friend and ended up at San Francisco General Hospital that afternoon. And this great lesbian was working there as a nurse. And she just made me sit in her office for a couple hours in between appointments and stuff like that, and borrowed $15,000 to go to a treatment center because it was before the Affordable Care Act. But again, I'm privileged. I had a friend who was a downtown lawyer. She was making a lot of money. She didn't bat an eye. She got me into treatment, and I have been clean and sober ever since. 16 and a half years.
Best investment she ever made.
What's that?
Best investment she ever made.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she was the best man at my wedding. And every year on my sober anniversary, I call her, and it's always to say thank you, but I end up crying the whole time.
Right.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
What's your sober date?
January 29th, 2008.
Love
That's
it.
awesome.
Yeah.
You went an easier way than me, so that's awesome.
Yeah, no law enforcement consequences.
That's what
But here's it's because I was a privileged white guy living in San Francisco. So I tell this story that I used to tell at dinner parties, and then one day I was telling it just recently, like 2-3 years ago, and he's like, "That's a terrible white privilege story," because I was out doing meth with these guys, driving home. I hadn't paid the registration on my car in 3 years, and all of a sudden, I get pulled over in downtown San Francisco, not very far from my apartment. I'm like, shit, like what's going to happen to me now? And I've got a backpack on the front seat with all kinds of stuff in it that I did not want anyone to know, including probably 3 different Schedule A drugs. And the cop was like very nice. And he said, "Mr. Marshall, your registration's expired. It's been expired for a number of years. We're going to have to impound your car." And I was like, okay, I just want it out of there. And so he's like, "Okay, you can leave after we did all the paperwork. You don't have to stay here. We'll wait." And I was like, okay. So I started like walking away really fast. I'm about 25 feet away. And he's like, "Mr. Marshall." And I was like, oh. I turn around, he reaches in and he gets my bag of drugs and he hands them to me and says, "Don't you want to take this with you?" Now, if I'd been a person of color, or even younger,
Or Julie. Yeah, or Julie.
yeah, or younger or whatever, like they probably would have looked in the bag. And so I never had any law enforcement consequences despite buying and selling. And
God had a better purpose for you.
yeah.
And I don't think it's as important as how we got here as that we got here.
Yeah,
Amen.
exactly.
I had several close calls like that where
Yeah.
I would get pulled. I should have had the breathalyzer
Yep.
and taken to jail, and I got to walk away. And
Yeah.
one of the times, they just said, "You got to go home." But they left my car there and everything, so that I came back and was able to take it. And I was like, "This wasn't so bad."
I say this all the time when people are sharing their stories because mine was a little different. It was an election year too. And
Oh.
so prostitution being a big subject always.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
So yeah, it was a little different. So,
yeah,
and many years ago, before the word sex trafficking even came up.
right.
Yeah, so
Sex workers. Yeah.
yeah. And I agree with you. Your childhood, my dad died at 15.
Yeah.
And I lived with a nanny, Irish Catholic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And I would say having a nanny, probably some privilege there, but that I think determined the outcome of my life of the molestation.
Yeah.
They say, and I didn't know this until just recently, being molested, then the prostitution, and then the IV drug usage, and then going to prison, that most people that go through that, my doctor always makes me feel special because it's 8% that survive.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And you'll know who, I'm not going to say the name out loud, but thank God for Peter because I was really overwhelmed that night. I don't watch the news. at all.
Right.
And I was watching the Boston Celtics game. And I'm a diehard Boston Celtics fan. And a former elected official in Oregon passed away.
Oh.
And I was one of my clients in the escort service. And
Oh.
it brought back so many memories that I seriously was in IOP, sober. I never had seen a client since I got out of prison. I went to a gay men's meeting and I have stayed there
Yeah.
for 27 years. I felt safe.
A lot of straight women to go to gay men's meetings.
I
especially
was
in
the only
beginning.
girl at
Yeah,
Lunch Bunch. When I
right.
started there, I was the only freaking girl. And it was a blessing. But those memories, and one of the only people that was really my client. And then in the story, they talked about this other person who, same situation as me, and died.
Yes.
And for weeks, I was stuck in it. And this is just recent. So
Yeah.
I really get it.
Oh,
Mhm.
Julie, I had no idea. That's
Yeah, it was hard, huh? I called Peter and I'm like, I'm fucking freaking out, bro.
yeah.
Yeah. And because becoming a successful manager at Sprint for so many years, staying sober for so many years, never had to deal with any of that. And again, I don't watch the news. And I like call Roger or ask Peter. I ask Peter stuff all the time. I like, what's going on with this? I saw
Yeah.
it on Facebook or something. So, yeah.
Well, that's I know who you're referring to. That's
Yeah.
a big part of Oregon's history.
Yeah.
That story.
Yeah. It was a lot.
A lot to
So
process.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
it's okay. You
Yeah.
know what? It makes me stronger.
Right.
I think processing it, I think I didn't admit I was even molested until 56. I think you get what you need when you need it.
Yep.
And I think for a long time, it was just enough for me to be sober.
Well, and we talked about this with a previous guest. A lot of the drink, for me, it was drinking, but a lot of the using is to suppress feelings.
Right.
It's to numb yourself. And then when you get sober and you're in recovery, it's like you don't have anything to numb yourself. All these feelings, so you have to deal with them and process them. And some of them are from years back.
And it's crazy. I had never really thought about it.
Yeah.
Like, never. And what is the chance of me watching Channel fucking 2? No. Like, I'm on ESPN 24/7. I am
Yeah.
a sports girl. Izzy calls me, what team are you rooting for? Which guy do you like the best? And had it not been the Celtics game, I wouldn't have even seen it. Yeah.
I can't believe you wouldn't have seen it on social media, though.
No.
That's true. It's such past history, and it's just that his passing is the reason it was recent. But it's interesting, this whole conversation around trauma and your addiction and mental health and addiction. And in the years that we've been doing this policy work in Salem, so many mental health providers are saying, you've got to deal with someone's mental health issues and simultaneous with their substance use disorder issues. And I actually don't think that's true for a lot of folks. I think you are much better off dealing with your substance use issues and getting a year or two of recovery.
Yes.
I
And
actually
then
agree
start
with you.
doing that hard, painful work. But if you're trying to do both at the same time, and in some cases you just have to, there's
Right.
there's such obstacles to each other.
Sometimes you
But
need the medication to
Right.
get to a place, but I think, and I didn't change my attitude on it until a couple years ago, going to prison, I was ashamed and embarrassed. My mother was as well. Thank God she's not here hearing me tell this story again. But going to prison was the timeout I needed to get sober.
yeah,
AA gave me the foundation to stay sober after treatment. And going to the gay men's meeting gave me a safe place.
right.
I didn't even trust when I got out of prison.
I can imagine.
And I went to meetings for 4 years, 3 months, and 22 days without missing one. Yeah. So and I'm a mom and I was raising
Yeah.
my daughter at that time. And that was enough for me. Raising her sober, making sure none of the experiences that happened to me, nothing's happened to my child.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Yeah, but I do agree with you. I think for me, it would have been way too much.
You're too raw when you first
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
into recovery.
You need sort of emotional muscle to be able to
Yeah.
open that stuff up and let it go. And
Yeah, it
and they
took-
say that's why ecstasy with particularly folks with PTSD is really good because it's not, what it does is it allows them to start remembering things and saying things out loud that are painful. But if you're on ecstasy, the dopamine it keeps it
makes
from
it
being
like
too
euphoric.
painful to say it. And
Right.
so it allows you to open the box on it. And
Wow.
I'm not advocating that people in
No.
recovery use ecstasy.
No, I was lucky. I was
Yeah,
in IOP, which gave me a safe place. And then literally the next day I had therapy and I had been like, watch the news, right?
Yeah.
And to the therapist. And then we processed it. And I actually talked to Peter about it more. And I was like, Peter, this is just pissing me off.
Yeah.
And took a minute. But I agree with you. Sometimes it's just enough to be sober first. And I think it's also
And get your confidence in being in
Yeah.
sobriety.
Yeah.
Well, as we say, first things first. So like just
yeah.
focus on putting one foot ahead of the other for whatever amount of time you need until you're ready for that.
Yeah, I think this was the time.
Yeah.
I think whatever I go on to next, I'll be more complete. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Which the podcast has, oh my God, helped.
Yeah.
Yeah, processing everything. So, how do you get from, you've had a career, just the part you've told us, to get passionate about this part?
In all of that background, I was like trained as a community organizer by folks that came out of the farm worker movement, of Cesar Chavez farm worker movement. And when I moved back to California, but before I got sober, I got very involved in the early days of the marriage equality movement and
I love that.
ran the first campaign against a anti-gay ballot measure which was in 2000 in California. And we lost by a wide margin, but I was just reading a chapter. Someone actually wrote a chapter in a book about me that was about the stories of marriage equality. And I was remembering how hard that was, but it was taking a highly traumatized community, both as a consequence of the stigma and discrimination they had experienced relative to being gay. But bear in mind, this was 2000. So the AIDS crisis had just started to diminish because it was in 1996 that the protease inhibitors became available and people stopped dying. Not completely, but it was a very quick change of heart. And so I was out there in California trying to organize statewide a community that was angry at each other, that had all the racial things, the gender things. It turns out for years, the lesbian community and the gay men's community hadn't communicated at all. But the AIDS crisis brought them together because the women came and took care of the men. And here 13 years ago, I'd met my husband in AA in San Francisco and we were dating and he got a job in Portland and I just decided I needed to change and that he was my guy. And so I moved here with him.
Lucky Portland.
Yeah. And I immediately became campaign manager for Oregon United for Marriage, the effort to repeal our ban on gay marriage. But then the courts overturned that, so we didn't have to go to the ballot. And that same day, Governor Kitzhaber hired me to run his reelection campaign. And that was very exciting and crazy. And as I like to say, we docked the Titanic. But then when his whole thing blew up, it was very hard for me to find a job because I was new to the state and I was tainted by his scandal. But I ended up at the City Club of Portland for 2 years. And then I learned about how badly Oregon dealt with addiction, that we have the second highest addiction rate, ranked last in access to treatment.
Yeah.
And started talking to a number of people, Harry Wilson, who was the chair of Fora Health, and Eric Martin at MACBO, who I met through this, and Brent Canode at the Alano Club. And we needed an advocacy effort. We needed a voice because Alcoholics Anonymous had prevented the recovery community from ever saying out loud, like, what needs to happen. And I had all this lifetime of organizing experience. I was out as a person in recovery. And because of the jobs I'd had in the short time I was in Oregon, I had the phone numbers for the current governor and 2 former governors in my contact list. I knew a lot of people, and so I could leverage that on behalf of the recovery community. And so we got some money in a pot, and I went to work in 2017 with Oregon Recovers. And we recognized that as a constituency, the recovery community wasn't just about people in recovery, it's our friends and family, and it's the people that work in the recovery space. So I like to say it's people in recovery and the people who love us and the people who take care of us, and coming together to build power through organizing. And that's why we do the Walks for Recovery. And it's why we do the Recovery Community Summit. It's why we do the Advocacy Day and the annual lunch and these 2 policy summits that we just did the last couple of days, is to demonstrate that the recovery community is not just about each individual's recovery, but it's in fact, we are a collective community that has aspirations for Oregon, right? And so we've built power through that. I think we're a highly recognized brand and a highly recognized voice in Salem.
100%.
A lot of legislators who don't like us on both sides of the aisle, because I believe the only way we're going to solve this crisis is to speak truth to power. And it turns out when you speak truth to power, it gets pissed off.
Well, they don't want to.
Go figure.
Yeah.
And I think power, you want to ship it in a box and put a ribbon on it,
Yeah.
and it really has to be dealt with. I think all the stuff being done. You mentioned Eric Martin. He comes up a lot in our
Yeah, I'm
stuff
sure.
as well.
He's the granddaddy.
Yeah. So I just got my certification.
Oh, cool. Congrats.
Yeah. I wanted to do it because of the podcast. Now we'll see if I go into that field or not, because I'm leaving the corporate world for sure.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But yeah, I do agree with you. And I think the more people that fight for it, the better. Oregon needs a lot of help.
Yep.
There are other places, but I live in Oregon.
Yes. The challenge here is that we have money, but we just don't have leadership. Like there's great legislators, there's great city elected officials and county elected officials, but the sum of the parts is just so mediocre on its very best days. And so it's why I've decided to run for city council. It's not that the city has great resources or delivers services, but the cities Portland is really hurting because the state and the county are not doing what they need to do relative to addressing our addiction crisis. And so it is a city council member's job to try and fix it. Maybe not have the city pay for it, have the city or the county or the state or private foundations, whatever, but just let's get shit done for a change. And
It is a problem. You're absolutely right. And it does need a good leader. 100%.
It needs
Yeah.
leaders.
Yeah.
I need it at every level. And it's just inexplicable to me how some people get elected to office and then they become this completely different person relative to their willingness to fight for what needs to happen or make things happen instead of, oh, okay, we'll do a pilot project. No. 8 people are dying today due to alcohol and drugs, and 8 will die tomorrow and 8 will die the next day. And that's just the alcohol statistic. That just leaped up
We
from
see it in
6
our
to 8.
group.
Yeah.
In our group. Thank God I'm not from the fentanyl era.
You're right.
Right?
Likewise.
Meth was really
Mhm.
meth when
Yeah.
I did it.
Yeah,
Thank-
it wasn't this crazy meth
yeah,
either, right?
thank God, because
Yeah.
I was an IV drug user, but
Me
I
too.
am so straight up scared to fuck with some fentanyl.
Yeah.
And we see guys that come in our group, they do well, and then they're gone. I've seen a couple from Izzy's group, and it overwhelms my brain. And I don't think you can go just to Beaverton. I'm from Beaverton. And you can go to Beaverton and it all looks clean and pretty. I
Yeah.
live off Division. It definitely doesn't look clean and pretty.
Right.
And what your reality is not my reality.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. You can drive just 17 minutes from here to Damascus, and it's all country and it's beautiful. But Portland, whoosh.
The other day, my husband and Rob and I were driving, and I looked out to the left side of the window, and there was a woman injecting herself in the neck, which I was an IV drug user, but that was beyond.
That is scary.
I got out of it before I got to that place. And so I had to look away because 16 years later, I still find that triggering. And so I looked out the other window, and there was a guy being just a traditionalist and putting it in his arm. And I was like, you can't not see it, right?
Right.
And
That would make me sick.
and we know what we need. We need sobering centers where cops can drop people off instead of arresting them and putting them in a jail cell. We need to triple our detox capacity. Fora Health and Hooper turn away 50% of everyone who gets in line every morning at 6 o'clock. And for everyone that's in line, there are 10 people probably said, I'm not going to go get in line because I
Right.
got turned away 3 times.
Yeah.
But that's been going on for years.
I didn't know 50%.
Yeah, 50%. And 60% of the people that go to Hooper or Fora are there for alcohol, not meth and fentanyl. And that's the other part of this that no one really wants to talk about. But so we have about 100 detox beds in Portland. We need 300. That's a lot of money, but it's not exorbitant. And given the price we're paying relative to
cleaning up just the freaking trailer
Yes.
areas. Peter comes to my house and once every month it's clear for 4 days.
Yeah.
He'll be like, Clinton, 136 in Clinton. And he'll be like, it's clear. And then he's like, oh, they're back.
Yeah.
And we've had a stabbing 1 block from my house. And yesterday, 3 garages caught on fire.
Oh my God.
And we just spent $5.1 million redoing our HOA. It's crazy. And like people just, I see it, it's like a drive-through drug station. It's bad. 300 beds. We need to make that happen.
One of the things I've heard some of the other individuals we've talked to in or working at recovery centers is breaking down the silos.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that are wanting to do good, but they're all siloed and trying to get. And one thing I heard recently was where they were
from Tara.
Yeah, Tara, about the police having meetings with the centers. I don't know if it's once a week or every morning or how often
every
it was,
night,
but
and they'll know how many
and getting
beds
to know
are open,
how many centers there are, how many beds are in
little
each
small
center.
project downtown.
Yeah. So, which is hugely important. And how did it take this long to figure that out? The one thing I'm really proud about at Oregon Recovers is under COVID, we launched the Oregon Recovery Network, which was a crowdsourced place. Literally, we set it up the day that the governor sent us all home, like shut down the state, thinking it was going to be a month or two. But it was where people could go find their AA meetings before they were posted on the AA website or their Smart Recovery or whatever. And then what recovery houses had beds open, they could post on there. All of a sudden, the treatment providers wanted people to know because the treatment providers had to cut in half their capacity, but then people weren't even trying. They were like losing money because they weren't filling the beds, the half beds they had. So last August, we partnered with Care Oregon to the tune of $500,000 a year, and we relaunched and rebranded as the Recovery Network of Oregon.org. And now there's also an app. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but you can go on there and my colleagues don't like this, but it's a grinder for recovery, right? Like when you go on there, all the close by recovery organizations, whether it's housing, treatment, community center, or even just a health center, shows up on your little map on your phone.
I love it.
We're now planning on being able to do exactly what they're trying to do locally in downtown Portland, but be able to do it statewide, which is all of the providers will be able to update it in real time so that you can go on there and not only see that Fora Health accepts this insurance, which currently is listed, but as of this morning, they have a 4-week waiting list, so it would stay 0. But Serenity Lane down in Eugene has 3 beds in the men's unit this morning. Why the state has not figured that out, because they do it with alcohol. Like the OLC's at a website that we could look at it right now and know where within 5 miles to buy a pink bottle of vodka and what the price point is. And
you can buy cannabis on every other block on Division. It's more than McDonald's, right? Or
insane.
Starbucks.
Yeah.
It's insane. Yeah.
But the Oregon Recovery Network I'm really proud of, because it's a huge
be.
asset.
Yeah.
And that point that why it took so long for the cops and the providers to be talking, but it's finally happening. And Measure 110, which I opposed, is a big part of creating that level of relationship building and funding organizations like 4D and Painted Horse and True Colors to be able to hire the peers to do the street work. And to your point, Peter, the connection part, right? Because it's like building hallways, right? And I think that's what peers really are good at, is they can help people go from one level of care to the next, instead of sending them out this door and saying, go across town to this door by yourself.
No.
Us addicts were like, okay, I'm just going to stop in here and have a drink or hit a meth.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Peter, being the genius that he is, will add that website to our website, because we have them all on our website.
Yeah.
We'll do it because we don't care which recovery source you are. You don't either. We just want you to find it, or for us to inspire you.
Yeah.
But that is amazing.
Yeah. It's great.
It is.
It sounds like that's a great foundation that's just been built. So what's next? We need more facilities. We need more
Yeah.
If
we
you
always-
had a magic wand, what would
So-
you get?
I'd want 4 sobering centers here in Portland, 1 in each quadrant of the cities. And we really should be thinking about it in the context of Multnomah County, but I'm running for city council, so I think about it in the context of the city. And then triple our detox capacity. We currently have 100 beds. We need 200 more. And then do we need more residential treatment beds? Yes, but that's expensive. It takes a long time. What we really need more of to bridge that and also to supplement that is recovery housing, sober recovery housing, which under the policy of housing first, which I agree with, but precluded local governments from investing in recovery housing, right? Abstinence-based housing couldn't get money for the longest time because it wasn't low barrier. And so that has changed. We got the county last year to put $10 million into recovery housing just in Multnomah County. The governor put $19 million in the budget for statewide, which is not a huge amount of money, but each year
Every little bit helps.
every little
Yeah.
bit helps. And so we're seeing a lot of recovery housing coming online. So then you link recovery housing with intensive outpatient programs like it's Serenity Lane or CLO treatment or
Another chance.
Another Chance.
They'll take anybody right
uh,
now, even if they don't have insurance, which I think
right.
is so admirable.
Yeah, that's great. CLO treatment will help you figure out where to go.
Yeah.
They won't
They're
just say,
miracle
sorry,
wo-
we can't take you.
They're miracle workers
Yeah,
as well.
and they have housing as well. And in many ways, that's more successful, depending on the level of the person's addiction. Like for people addicted to fentanyl, to not be in a residential facility is probably very difficult just because of the cognitive healing that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the beauty of having someone go into recovery housing and then doing intensive outpatient is when the intensive outpatient starts stepping down to
They have
weekly,
the
whatever.
support they need.
Exactly. Their housing doesn't change.
Their recovery capital.
Exactly. Their recovery capital.
Their
Exactly.
recovery capital.
And the folks that they're going to meetings with or whatever form their recovery takes, going to the recovery gym or whatever, that's not disrupted because they're leaving treatment to go back into their old community or they're going into a brand new community, right? And so,
I've seen that work a lot.
yeah,
I've seen people go from the IOP, get in the sober housing, and then it's a job. And
Yep.
later down the road, it's an apartment. It's where one of the guys we did a story on. Sober housing has been everything for him. Grateful for just having a bedroom.
Yep.
He didn't care if he shared it with somebody
Right.
else. He was off the streets.
Yep.
And then backed it up with AA and IOP. And it's really,
And a roommate that's also in recovery. And Eric Martin has brought in a certification process through MACBO now for these recovery houses because some of them have been pretty dodgy in the past, right?
Right.
The minute somebody starts relapsing, then it's not unusual maybe for a whole house that's not had a good manager. But I think that's less and less so now. And so that's something that local government has a real vested interest in seeing because it's cheap too. You can get a clean, safe, supportive place in a bed in a recovery house for $650 a month in Portland. You can't find
Get-
housing for that
you
much.
can't. And what I've seen is the accountability of 3 meetings a week
Yep.
and a UA.
Right.
And you need that.
Yep.
I'm grateful I had it at first. And right when I got done treatment, the parole officer said, hey, you're going to have to get your meeting slip signed. And I just went to AA to get off parole.
Yeah.
And seriously.
Yep.
And at the 6th month, when I got off parole, I was like, I'm going to stay.
Yep.
Yeah. And I was scared to leave, like scared to freaking leave.
And you found your people too, right? And that's what happens when you go to residential treatment, you find your people, like you fall in love with those people, but then you all leave at different points, right? And go back into a world and you don't have that support mechanism. So I'm a huge proponent of recovery housing. And so that's a big part of what we need as well. And then we need prevention.
I've heard a lot about the recovery because we've talked to a lot of people in those recovery centers. But yeah, what about the preventive side? And I know that seems like such a monumental, especially you can't keep up with the people producing the drugs and
Right.
pushing them into the area and
You
law
can't arrest them
enforcement.
all.
So how do we work that side of it?
So, information is power. And we live in a society right now where alcohol advertising has no limits on it for the most part. And so we're continuing to raise generations of kids, just like we were in an Irish Catholic family, that said, when you have a feeling, pour a substance on it. Like, you're with the guys and you're feeling all that testosterone, drink beer. If you're on a romantic date and
champagne and wine.
Yeah, exactly. Like on Mother's Day, take mom a bottle of Chivas Regal. That's the ad that drives me around the bend every year. Like baby showers now, they have alcohol. Funerals, they have alcohol. It's just every sporting event is about alcohol. The music scene, the money is made through alcohol. And so we really have to figure out how to change the culture that we're in. And so what's the prevention? Because we know that telling teenage kids don't drink, don't smoke dope, that has the opposite effect.
Exactly.
We know that from experience.
That's why I don't tell my daughter who to date. She doesn't listen to me anyway.
She'll want to piss you off, so she'll date that one guy. Right?
Yeah.
Like, good for her.
She's so independent that, no, seriously. Do you think the drink campaign is helpful?
Love it. But what people need to know is the alcohol industry is making it really hard for Oregon Health Authority. They canceled their summer media buy because of pushback from the alcohol industry. And Oregon Recovers has weighed in very harshly with the Oregon Health Authority. You shouldn't even be talking to them.
Yeah.
The alcohol industry is structured so that 60% of their profits, not their revenue, their profits are derived from excessive use or underage use of their products. So their business model is predicated on the abuse of alcohol, not the moderate drinker having a great bottle of wine for a special occasion. And so to listen to them and give them a seat at the table that in decision making is just crazy. But for the Oregon Health Authority to feel cowed by them is really bad. But it's because the legislators, many of whom drink, are the alcohol industry's biggest advocates. And that's hugely problematic. But I think Rethink the Drink is brilliant. I'm on the national board of the U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance. And I can tell you there's no other state that has the education program like that. It just isn't reaching very far because so few
I like
resources.
it though. I think for the average person, right?
Yeah.
What I liked about the commercial and was that, hey, Joe, are you realizing you're having 6 beers?
Yeah.
And then they put them all on the table.
Yeah.
And you realize, holy crap, I really do have, and I think one, rethinking it then sets a different precedent for your family.
Yep.
And that it's not okay. I like you. My mother was a bartender.
Yeah.
Okay, cream de mint would solve your stomach ache.
Yeah.
Okay, no, seriously. She offered that to me for my stomach ache. When my daughter was teething, she's put some around her gums. I forget what alcohol it was. And I was like, no. But there was a solution for everything. And I was allowed to have champagne on special occasions and a wine spritzer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Creme de menthe. Yeah, my grandmother, that was a favorite thing for her to give to me when I was a kid.
Cold, hot toddy, hangover, Bloody Mary.
Yeah.
It was like medicinal.
And we had glasses growing up for every type of cocktail.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
It was so highly ritualized.
They're dessert glasses now, but look at that martini collection.
exactly.
That's an ode to my past.
And it was so ritualized and celebrated. And now it's 10 times worse than it was when we were kids, right? Just the way alcohol is so pervasive. So just getting back to the conversation around prevention, just even rethink the drink. It's not don't drink. It's not reduce drinking. It's just rethink. And the way you're going to rethink is to have factual information about the health consequences of alcohol consumption, right? And so I think that's where we need to put a lot more energy, because we know there's a thing called the National Survey for Drug Use and Health every year. And that's what tells us that we have the second highest addiction rate in the country, and we rank last in access to treatment. They also look at perceptions of harm by substance. So they ask everybody in every state, how dangerous do you think cocaine is? How dangerous do you think cannabis is? How dangerous do you think alcohol is? And Oregon ranks 50th in perceptions of harm, last in recognizing the harms of all of these substances in every category.
Really?
Yes. And
The hell up.
And
Because I can see it in every category. I knew that we were first in usage, last in treatment facility, but I didn't know that. That you just gave me a new statistic, and that's crazy because the amount of deaths, I believe, are higher than cancer.
Oh yeah, easily. And I think I said this. We have been saying when we started Organ Recovers, there were 5 people a day who died due to alcohol, and then went up to 6. But I discovered in this presentation that at our conference on alcohol policy on Tuesday, the state epidemiologist, Dr. Seidlinger, came and presented brand new data. It has jumped from 6 deaths a day to 8 deaths a day in Oregon due to alcohol. That's over 3,000 people a year just for alcohol.
Wow.
And that's like, now we had been 3 times what drug overdoses were. And then the drug overdose rate went up to, it's now 2 to 3 a day. And now we're back to 2.5 times due to alcohol. And so, but we have to think of them together, right?
Yeah, alcohol leads to the drug usage.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Or vice
And like I
versa.
said, we promote alcohol, we promote substances as a positive thing relative to any feelings you're having. So why should we be surprised when some 15-year-old or 25-year-old whose life is not going well wants
Thinks it's
to
okay.
medicate themselves,
Yeah.
and alcohol and cannabis isn't working anymore, and the guy they're dating has got meth or has fentanyl or cocaine or whatever. It lowers the barriers and boundaries that we really need to be raising our kids with relative to this.
I also think that what True Colors is doing, having a safe, drug-free place that's fun, that appeals to, like for me, being gay and going out, all there was the bars. That's where you went. That's where you went to meet people. That's where you went to socialize. My second home was a bar when I came out. And to have a place like True Colors, and maybe having more of those types of places available where youth can feel free to have fun and enjoy themselves and not have that stigma of,
Right.
I have to get high or I've got to get drunk to fit into everything.
Well, and I think that comes down to a philosophy, and I hear it all the time, is that you have to make your sobriety as attractive as you did your using.
Yes.
Because if you don't make your sobriety attractive and you just stay home and stay off alcohol, it's probably not going to work. Where like you and I do so many activities. I'm happy for a week off, but it's good. We go to fellowship every Friday. I play bingo in the park with my group. I'm all about the blackout bingo, earn the money for a pedicure. But then I go to True Colors for a meditation meeting.
Yeah.
And my first time at True Colors, I went for the ice cream. They were having 50 licks there.
Yeah.
And I had chocolate as fuck, and it was so good. And that's when I heard about Amanda and that she went to prison, and I wanted to be just like her.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Look, we love her.
Yeah.
And she really inspired me when Peter said about the podcast, and I said, yeah, let's do that. And he was like, what would we name it? And a week later, my head was exploding and came up with the name. And then Peter finds all the .coms and the domains and the everything. But she really inspired me to take my opportunities, I'll use the professional term, and do something good with them. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I also think that what's helpful, and I don't know who is behind it per se, but the NA movement, like there's a lot more, like you used to go and all I had, my options for alternatives was Coke, lemonade, sparkling Martinellis, and now there's so many other options available. Yeah. And they're making them cool. Like it's cool to have even if I wasn't an alcoholic, it'd be cool I'd be like, oh, maybe I'll just try this one because it sounds really good.
It's interesting. So alcohol consumption and cannabis consumption in Oregon has just gone through the roof, right, in recent years, except amongst youth. Both have gone down. And there's no good understanding as to why. The local prevention folks have done really some great work in the schools and things like that. But I think I was listening to NPR recently, and there was a story about this. And part of the reason they think is that kids today are so focused on their mental health and their mental health diagnoses that they then educate themselves about how can they address their mental health problems. And they have begun to read that alcohol and cannabis actually makes your mental health issues worse. And so it's why the alcohol companies are petrified. And you're seeing more and more marketing of cider or alcohol
Claw.
that looks a lot like soda
Yeah.
or
That
water.
claw stuff. I almost
Yeah.
got fooled. I'm like, oh, what's that? Is it a sparkling seltzer? And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh shit, it's an alcoholic drink.
There's a White Claw ad right here on 205, and you look at them and it looks like high school kids.
Yeah.
And the models are probably 21 years old.
Right.
But the intent is to,
And see, that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
And as well as I know cigarettes, but cigarettes are so advertised in under areas, meaning again division.
Yeah.
Smoker zone, everything going up the street, where in Beaverton you don't see it half as much. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. They I think target the lower income.
yep,
Yeah.
without a doubt. And they're not supposed to. I was just learning about this the other day, is particularly around cannabis, but also alcohol. Each billboard has a measurement of the demographics that see it, and they shouldn't be advertising any of this stuff in any billboards that have less than 70% adult, like that. Only 30% of the people that see it are underaged, which
Wow.
is ridiculous, right? Like it should be 0%.
Zero.
Like they just shouldn't be. But because what difference does that make? If a kid sees it, a kid sees it. But it's also not enforced. The Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission has no advertising enforcement component, even though there are advertising restrictions relative to the licensing that they do. They don't do
That's
any
crazy.
compliance. Yeah.
I love hearing about what you're doing and what your organizations that you work with, your
Yeah.
organization and the ones you work with are doing. I've said this before. I feel like this dark tunnel, there's a light that's coming closer and closer. It's getting brighter and brighter. There's a lot of work to do.
There is.
And
That's why
we've got to be persistent,
We've
right?
tried to align our podcasts with the 4Ds, the True Colors, the GTDs,
Yep.
the Painted Horse Recovery, because we want to spread the message just like the stuff you said,
Yeah.
hoping that our message will get you to one of these things. Maybe walk down at the Oregon Recovers Walk, and yes, I will be there.
Excellent.
Yes.
Here in Portland, it's Saturday, September 28th. Go to walkforrecovery.org to sign
Yeah.
up.
And I
Yeah.
think that link is already,
Okay.
it might be on
All
our
right.
site already. But
Yeah. Tony sent it
I've been
to
working
me.
at it.
Yeah.
Getting
And
things
Izzy put our
updated as
logo
fast as
on
possible.
his
Oh, nice.
fundraiser. So I'm really excited. You're on there too. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it'll be our first logo on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
So the payback for the GTD shirt, how long ago?
Yeah, that's
and
great.
we just got
Well,
these. Like
yeah,
we just got these. So
We-
we're pretty excited.
We're
Very
very
cool.
And I think I can speak for Julie. I'm very proud of the people that we've had on the show, the ones that have been so vulnerable to share so much of themselves. And my biggest thing is I want everybody to listen that can listen. And that's where my challenge is. How do I try to do social media. I've done everything I could think of with the tech side. How do I want to put billboards all over town or something, get the word out.
Well, you should definitely come to the Walk for Recovery, and I probably know someone who can get you a table there for free. But it may even be cool to do some interviewing.
Right.
People that are there that day or walking and stuff like that.
Izzy said that.
The Walk for Recovery, to me, like, we designed it to be a fundraiser, and it's a big fundraiser for Oregon Recoverers, but it's not nearly as successful from a fundraising perspective as it could be. But it is such a healing process. The very first year we did it, it was at the park blocks downtown. So this was 2019. And we got up and we did a little raw program, and then we started walking. And as I was walking and talking to people, this woman who probably my age now, but she looked older back then, she says to me, "Mike, I wanted to come and introduce myself and say thank you." I was like, "Oh, great." And she's like, "I'm Ann, and I flew out here from South Carolina to be here."
Wow.
And I was like, "That's great, but how'd you even hear about it, let alone why?" And she said, "Because that young man over there is my grandson. And when he was getting sober 6 months ago out here, there was nothing I could do to be supportive. But I could come out here today when he told me he was going to walk, and I could walk with him and let him know how much I love him."
Oh.
That is amazing.
And every year there's those stories. In COVID, we did a sort of weird walk. So everybody was social distance or whatever, but there was 3 generations walking together. The mother, the middle generation, is a single mom. She had 2 of her little kids and then her parents there. And she was like 4 months sober.
I love that.
And the parents and the kids both, they're there to celebrate her recovery and not be relegated to a church basement on a folding chair anymore. Let's walk outside in the sunshine. And it's attraction rather than promotion. This is what is attractive,
Yeah,
right? You know?
promotion got me in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we absolutely agree with you. We did and will and have. I was at the walk last year.
Oh, good.
My husband, again, he spoke there, and a lot of our group was there.
Yep.
And the good thing, like my child was raised in it.
In
There was
recovery,
no
yeah.
alcohol in our house. Yeah. Luckily, she's never seen me be high or anything like
Yeah.
that. So I'm blessed in that area.
Well, thank God we got sober before Facebook
Oh
and
my
before
gosh.
cell phone
And cell
cameras.
phones. Oh,
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I could never.
There's one
Have a-
video. It was done on VHS, and I think it's now gone. But it was at the time, and it was filmed when I was quite inebriated, and then I saw it later, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, thank God there weren't cell phones and social media back then, because no, thank you.
Do you know
So-
you're ranked one of the 100th in the 100th percentile of influential men in our community?
Who? What?
Yeah, I saw it.
Who's ranking?
Here, you were in the top 100 most influential gay Americans by Out Magazine.
Oh, Out Magazine. That was back in the year 2000, and that was because of the work I did early on in the marriage equality movement.
It's still cool.
It's really good. I put it on my resume. Like,
Yeah.
I've never been that fabulous since. Because it was
No,
a pretty.
you're that fabulous now.
Yeah.
It's just you already got this award. No.
My husband and I have been together since 2020, but we got married when it became legal in Oregon in
Yep.
2004. And we're married for however many weeks it was before
Yep.
we got our check back in the mail, which was
Yeah.
really. And then in 2014, it became
Yep.
legal again. And so we got again married. And but we consider ourselves, no government needs
old
to tell
married
us,
couple.
yeah,
Right.
24 years.
I'm
is how-
sorry. It makes a difference, though.
It makes a difference in some ways, yes.
I
Validation for me that I am a normal person.
right, but I just felt like it made a difference in Robin and my life too, in the way we perceive each other. But it definitely, even in our parents who were so uncomfortable at our wedding, and partly because we had Poison Waters, the drag queen there.
Went to the city nightclub with Poison when she was just the rosebud and she wasn't the star she is now.
Oh my God, she was amazing. And there's a great moment where she comes up to start. We had her sort of moderate our reception, and Rob's parents were sitting with their back to her when she first arrived, and she's talking, and all of a sudden, Rob's mom is deaf, and so she speaks very loudly, and very loudly she goes, "Raymond, I think that's a man."
Let me tell you, when she was 18 and the Silverado and CC's and boxers and all of that was down there, she could stop traffic.
Yeah.
Like straight men were like, oh my God. I literally saw a car
Yeah.
stop for her and she was like, honey, you just don't even know. And I was like, holy crap. And she was like, when she was Rosebud, she was like, whoosh. Yeah.
Yeah. She was good friends with my roommate in Seattle and came to visit and fell through the attic roof, which is where my roommate stored all of his gowns and everything. And yeah, it's like that. What is that? 6
degrees of
6
separation.
degrees of- yeah, something-
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like Maria Peterslake and Kim and all the work they do for the LGBTQ scholarships.
Yeah.
That is my thing. I really appreciate them. Those two met them there as well. What a foundation. You could smoke weed in a club, right?
Yeah.
I had a education class there. What would you like our listeners to know as your like?
Final thoughts.
Oh gosh, I've been sober 16 years, but I'm still a drunk Irishman at heart. So I want to tell everyone what to think and how to feel. I want to say that if you're really, and I don't even say working your program because that would imply that you need to do 12 steps, but if you're in your recovery, it's hard still, but gratitude is just, it allows you to walk through life with gratitude. And I'm going through a lot with my 95-year-old dad and 87-year-old stepmom right now because of dementia, and my sister and brother are walking through it too with me. And particularly my sister, who's not sober, she has all these resentments that I was able to get rid of once I got sober.
Mm-hmm.
When every family has resentments, right? There's no perfect parents. And
Amen.
certainly when you're our age and our parents were emotionally dysfunctional as their generation was. And it's so much harder for her right now. And I'm just so grateful for that. And it's because of my recovery. And in my case, my recovery is my program, my 12-step program that it's rooted in. But I think no matter if you're, it's not a matter of just being sober, right? It's a matter of
Being active.
Yeah, but it's a matter of just celebrating recovery and making that an integral part of your life.
Yeah.
And so I have the benefit of that, both in the context of just my immediate family. And then I'm just so grateful to everyone who has participated in Oregon Recovers and the work that we do, because it saved my life too. Like we're on this it's a daily reprieve, and it's a cliche, but it's
One day
so
at a time.
fucking true. And Oregon Recovers has just allowed me to focus on my recovery absolutely every day, and in a much more different way than a lot of people have the opportunity to do. So it doesn't get stale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that.
But I think it's like a form of service in what you do. And some people, it's the one-on-one with someone new in the program and being there for them. And for me, editing these shows and doing the interviews, then re-editing, re-listening, I get it from that. And then we get it from hearing feedback that, oh, I listened to your show and it really touched me and brought this to the forefront for me, or whatever it is. And so in the different ways, but all of those things to me are like that service that we talk about in many programs, that form of service, that gratitude, giving back.
I send a gratitude list every day. And gratitude is when you have enough. And for me, as long as I have my sobriety, my recovery, anything's possible.
Right.
Without it, who knows? It's a prison cell, right?
Yeah.
So,
Or a grave.
Yeah.
You know,
Some of the stories.
Think a grave now. Mhm.
Yeah. Some of the stories we hear bring back those moments of when I wasn't in recovery and stuff that I went through. And I'm just like,
Yes.
Thank God for those reminders. Yeah.
Yeah. Yesterday's one we did was deep. And both Peter and I were like,
I had dreams about back in the day, reliving some of the things I went through based off of what we heard. So,
and then we had Melissa on our show. She's the regional director of Hillsborough 4D, and she talked about being too spirited and
yes, Melissa. Okay,
and came in really owning herself, and it was
she's fantastic.
Oh
yeah, she was awesome.
She's like this gorgeous person, gorgeous human being.
She's my kind of girl, and I guess what I mean by that is she's really real and not a fluff nut. I don't know how to explain it to you, but like she was amazing. And some of those just stick with you and inspire you for like forever. We've had some really good ones. So
yeah, every now and then we do a check-in and we'll often say, what was your favorite one that we've, and it's, I can't pick a favorite because every single story has some element that hits me in some way.
Right.
So,
and you're grateful no matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm just that I have a heart full of gratitude for our community, and also that our community is so vibrant today. When we started Oregon Recovery 7 years ago, it was hard to find recovery community leaders because there weren't many organizations, there weren't podcasts, there weren't events, and we have so much more in the last 7 years.
Well, and you're a foundation for a lot of them.
I'm totally proud of that, and everybody who's worked at Oregon Recovers, it wasn't me, it was a team effort, and the walks for recovery are successful because at the first one, 1,000 people showed up when we were planning on 250. That's not me.
Amazing.
That's our community being hungry to be out and to engage and to celebrate.
Yeah.
And we're all really lucky to have made it this far in our recovery to see the arc of that.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and share your story and so much more.
Well,
I
thank
love it.
you. I love these opportunities, and what you're doing undoubtedly is helping people in their recovery. So kudos.
We
so.
hope so. We really
know
hope
so.
Thank you for being here. It means a lot. And I love everything you explained. It gives so much more knowledge. And like you said, knowledge is everything.
That's Julie. I'm Peter here with Mike and the Real Recovery Podcast. Thanks for listening.
That's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks to each and every one of you for lending us your ears and hearts. Your engagement is what fuels our passion and keeps this podcast thriving.
We cherish the moments we share here and hope they resonate with you, whether you're on a daily commute, at the gym, or just taking a moment for yourself.
Make sure to head over to our website at realrecoverypodcast.com. While you're there, subscribe to our newsletter for the latest insights and uplifting stories from our community delivered straight to your inbox.
Click that subscribe button on your favorite podcast player too, so you can keep up with every new episode. It's your support that keeps our conversation alive and meaningful.
And if our stories have touched you, consider using the donate button on our site. Your contributions, no matter the size, are deeply appreciated. They help us continue our mission of sharing hope and healing.
Join us beyond the podcast and follow our journey on social media. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and on X, formerly known as Twitter. All the links are on our site, so you can stay connected and be a part of the Real Recovery community every day.
Your likes, shares, and comments not only spread the message of recovery, but also remind us that we're all in this together.
So, until we meet again, remember that recovery is a journey, not a destination, and we'll be here to accompany you every step of the way to recovery, real recovery.
Thanks for listening.